Very good afternoon everyone. I really hope you all doing great and staying absolutely safe as well. उम्मीद करता हूँ आप सब बहुत शानदार होंगे. First of all, would like to welcome you all to the platform of IAS Origin. IAS Origin इस platform में बहुत-बहुत स्वागत करना चाहूँगा. That's me Akash and Dev. And as you all know that we are decoding each year's paper properly bit by bit. So yesterday we did the focus on proper way that what kind of questions on environment are coming, and in the similar fashion today we are going to be focusing upon the disaster management ka component. So disaster management ka component, which is again a very important component when we talk about the GS paper 3. Today our main focus is going to be on this component of disaster management, which I am sure you know that it is a component which is of immense importance. Now, before I even move ahead, I want you all to understand that when we talk about the GS paper 3, I would say that it is the most diverse paper which we have in the UPSC mains examination. Because when you talk about the GS paper 1, we have history, geography, society. GS paper 2 may be polity, governance, you've got IR, social justice. But if you talk about the GS paper 3, as I've already told you, we have got so much. We have to study science and tech, we have to study disaster management, we have to study environment ecology, we have to study internal security, we have to study economy. So that's why this GS paper 3, in a way, I personally feel is most difficult to tackle effectively. So if you really effectively want to prepare for this very paper, it is not an easy task for anyone for that matter. So that's the reason why I always say that we have to have a proper plan for this paper. And in order to have a proper plan, you need to have a proper analysis. Analysis is zaruri hai. And that is precisely what we are doing over here as well. So now I hope you understand that what exactly is the relevance of the kind of discussions we are having, on the platform IAS Origin. On regular basis, we are doing that. So we did promise that we will be, coming up with these sessions, and we are doing that on the regular basis, as you all know. And I feel that this, in a way, is giving you a lot of clarity as well, that what exactly is to be prepared for this very, paper. For in fact, all the papers out there, when we talk about the UPSC mains examination, so we have to have a proper clarity in our minds. Now, having said that, always keep one thing in your mind, that GS paper 3's approach is slightly different than other papers approach. We also have to have a good idea about what exactly is going on in the current affairs as well, related to that particular thing, so that also in a way can help you a lot. So anyways, when we talk about this very paper, so as we have already discussed about the environment, so today we are going to discuss about the disaster management. Now, if you pick the syllabus out there, what the syllabus mention is actually a very interesting thing. So would like to show you that from this disaster management, what the syllabus has to offer. When you pick the syllabus, it says disaster and disaster management. This is what the syllabus is saying. Syllabus क्या कहता है? Disaster and disaster management. This is precisely what the syllabus is telling us. Clear? Now, what I would say is that syllabus is तो very much open-ended. ये तो मतलब बोल रहे थे कि disaster management, but what precisely is it trying to ask is actually a very important thing. So always remember this thing, that what exactly are the key themes, I would say, when we talk about the UPSC paper, we have to understand. So here, though syllabus will not tell you, but based on previous analysis, when we pick the key themes, what exactly are the key themes we are supposed to understand? So key themes में क्या है? We have got climate induced disasters. It can be a cyclone, it can be a landslide, happening somewhere because of the cloud burst we talk about. Then there's a theme, note karo isko, of urban flooding as well. Urban flooding also, since 2015, 2016, they are asking on the regular basis. That's very much important. And then they also focus on various frameworks. Various frameworks in order to combat the disaster, in order to improve our disaster resilience. That how do we bounce back from a disaster? That is very much important. So these are kind of recurring themes. In fact, let me tell you one thing. For example, just to give an example, like we talk about Sendai framework. That's important. National Disaster Management Authority की guidelines, NDMA guidelines. So we are supposed to have a decent idea on these kind of ideas, because when a question comes, if you are not fully prepared, unfortunately you are not going to be in a position to answer in a fashion in which it is required. So it is very much important for you to keep this very thing in your mind. Now, having said that, remember one very basic idea which I would like you all to understand today, which is certainly important. If I pick the overall analysis, like this is 2024 का GS पेपर 3 का disaster management का portion. Got it? This is a disaster management का portion from 2024 paper only. If you have a look, now the question was there were two 15 marker questions. So basically I would say that we had 30 marks ka disaster management which was asked. Question was, what is disaster resilience? Question mark. How is it determined? Question mark. Describe various elements of disaster of resilience framework. Also mention the global target of Sendai framework. अब ये देखो, now this is a global framework. Sendai framework is a global framework for which we have to have a proper idea. So that's important, that you have to mention global targets of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. That's certainly very much important. So why in the first place are we supposed to have a decent level of clarity? Because these are the kind of the questions you will be getting, and you are supposed to then answer in an accordingly. So every year you will have, I can assure you, like this year 30 marks question was there, but at times when we talk about the disaster management thing, you will either have one question or two questions. So usually 1 to 2 questions are asked, not many questions are asked. But let me tell you one thing, it is a low hanging fruit. That means you don't have to apply too much focus on this portion. Even if you study not in depth, you have a proper selective study also, you can do this portion very much effectively. So I can assure you this thing. So अगर थोड़ा बहुत भी अगर आप करते हो इसको अच्छे से, so you will be in a comfortable position in the examination. I can assure you of that. So that is the reason I always tell that try to not skip this portion. Try to make sure that you are preparing this portion diligently, because in the long run it is going to be of immense importance. So that's the reason why in the past year papers we are going to be doing over here, so that you get a decent level of idea that how exactly are you going to be preparing for this particular thing. Got it? So I am hopeful that now this point is absolutely understandable to all of you. सबको ये एक basic idea यहाँ पे मिल गया होगा. Okay, now moving ahead, when we move to like other papers, इससे पहले के जो papers हैं वो देखते हैं. Anyways, 2024 में we had a question on flooding in the urban area. So see the theme of urban floods, urban flooding, that is there. Disaster reduction frameworks are there. So this is actually a very much important theme. So always keep this in your mind that you are supposed to be effectively preparing these themes. So new themes can be there in the news. For example, various disaster this frameworks, resilience frameworks can be there in news as well. So if there it is in news, you have to prepare accordingly. Climate induced disasters, you have to prepare accordingly. It can be like, for example, cloud bursts, say damage ho rahi hai. We should know about that as well. Urban flooding, I've already told you, is an important theme. Okay, and various frameworks we have talked about. So I'll tell you why the analysis is important. Analysis is basically important just because of one thing, that analysis will give you what to study and what not to study. As simple as that. भाई क्या पढ़ना है क्या छोड़ना है, that is something you get from the analysis. So though this thing that you have to skip this or you have to do that don't stands true for all the subjects. But yeah, ultimately for disaster management I would certainly say that that particular thing is going to be very much helpful. Okay, so moving to the paper of 2023, if I talk about, we had a question on dam failures. They are catastrophic, especially in the downstream side. So they result in the colossal loss of the life and the property. Okay, so you have to analyze various causes of dam failure. You have to give two examples of the large dam failure. So Morbi ka isme dam failure ka example you have to give. So ultimately, this is actually a very interesting question because they have also asked for the example. It's a big catastrophe which happens. So this was a bit offbeat question, I would say. But again, if a question is there, you are supposed to be answering effectively. So that is very much important. So I'm hopeful that now at least you're getting an idea that what exactly are the kind of the questions which are being asked in the disaster management. In the same in the preceding year 2022 May, we had a question that explained the mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst. So ye dekho, now this is what? This is climate induced disaster. So you are supposed to know that if a question is there on the climate induced disaster, how in the first place are you supposed to be answering that very question? So just keep one thing in your mind, that whenever, if and when this kind of the question is asked, you are just supposed to have a decent level of understanding that how you have to approach it, and you will be absolutely good to go. So it is something which is very much important. uh, Anyways, so moving ahead, अब ये देखना 2021 में we had these two questions. Now read these questions yourself first of all, just to get a decent clarity on them. When you look at these questions, this is actually a very important question, I would say. So what is this about? It is that vulnerability of India to earthquake. So that is the question about. When we talk about examples including the salient features of major disaster caused by the earthquake in different parts of the India during the last 3 decades. So this is the question which is there. So this is certainly very much important. So that's a proper question on the disaster. Earthquake is a massive disaster, as we all know. So this is a question being asked on that. Now again, try to just keep one thing in your mind, that whenever a question like this is coming, you have to first of all, understand in a proper manner that how in the first place are you going to frame an answer. Have you read about it? If you have read about it, what exactly have you read about it? Only then I would say that you are supposed to be answering that very question effectively, because ultimately examiner actually requires you to have a decent level of understanding. So वो understanding तभी आएगी जब आपने उसको properly frame किया. So these questions are less of cramming, and they are more of that how in the first place are you framing a proper answer. So that actually is a very important point we have to be understanding. So anyways, so I hope now you're getting an idea that what exactly are the kind of questions which we are going to face in the paper. In 2021 itself, we had a question that described various causes and effect of landslides. So you can see there's a question of earthquake, there was a question on cloudburst, there's a question on landslides. Mention important component of national landslide risk management strategy. So we have got a proper strategy in place for landslide. You got to mention this particular thing in order to get good marks. So since we have got, now again have a look, they will ask you for a disaster and then they'll ask you for a mitigation plan of it. कि कैसे mitigate करें? How in the first place are we going to be mitigating that particular thing? How do we build some resilience related to that? So that is the kind of questions which we are seeing in this very paper. So mind you, you have to always keep this very thing in your mind, that if and when a question comes, you should be very well prepared in order to answer that. ये clear है? चलो. Now in 2020, if I take you, we had a question like discuss measures initiated in disaster management by the government of India, departing from the earlier reactive approach. Earlier we used to react when the disaster used to hit. Now we have a preemptive approach, that we are trying to make sure that we have got proper preparedness beforehand only. That when a disaster hit, unfortunately if it hits, we should be very well prepared in that particular case. That is what the strategy is. So now I would say that we have got a proper holistic strategy for that, which is actually great. So always try to have a basic idea that okay, what exactly is government doing, what exactly are the frameworks, National Disaster Management Authority, what is its role. I would always suggest you guys to go into that initial document and read that document and pick something which is very much beneficial for you. That actually is a very important thing. थोड़ा बहुत अगर आप खुद से पढ़ते हो, so that will in a way give you a proper idea, because see, you know that around 2 questions are going to come from disaster management, and I would say it is always beneficial that if you have already read something, about what exactly are the strategies, what are the new strategies to beat the disaster, it is always going to be of immense benefit for you. So try to have this particular thing in your mind that you have to read it properly. That is the way to go about it. So ये काफी important रहता है. Then in 2019, we had these two questions. Again, as I've told you, 1 to 2 questions are going to be there. So we had 2 questions in 2019. They are again very much important. I would like to talk about that as well. अब ये आप ध्यान से देखिए, अगर this very question actually is of immense value, I would certainly say. First of all, let's read this very question. ठीक है. So the question says that vulnerability is an essential element for defining disaster impact, कि हम कितने vulnerable है, and its threat to the people. So how and what ways can vulnerability to disaster be characterized? Discuss different type of vulnerability with reference to disaster. So you have to discuss various type of vulnerability in reference to disaster. So that's very much important. So this question was basically based on the vulnerability. अभी vulnerability index की बात आती है तो उससे भी आपको relate करना था. This was 10 mark का question, 150 marks you had to 150 words you had to answer. Then we talk about disaster preparedness. अब ये देखो, it's the first step in any disaster management process. So how well are we prepared? Mitigation strategies. So explain how hazard zonation mapping will help disaster mitigation in case of landslides. अब landslides के case में like we have got a proper atlas that which district या which areas are more landslide prone. कहाँ पे landslide आने के chances ज़्यादा हैं. So that precisely I would say is a great strategy, no doubt about it. In a way, what the examiner is trying to do, try to understand that. Examiner is just trying to make sure that you have holistically prepared this very topic and you know something meaningful to write. आप कुछ मीनिंगफुल लिख पा रहे हो कि नहीं लिख पा रहे हो, बस ये है सारी की सारी गेम. सो दिस इज समथिंग वी आर सपोज टू बी अंडरस्टैंडिंग प्रिसाइसली एंड दैट इज ऑफ इमेंस इंपॉर्टेंस. तो ये बहुत बेसिक पॉइंट्स हैं एंड ट्रस्ट मी, डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट के 1 to 2 क्वेश्चंस यू कैन डू immensely well. It is just that you have to have a decent level of clarity that how you have to approach that. How in the first place you are supposed to approach that particular question. If you know that idea, you are absolutely fine with that. उसमें कोई problem नहीं होगी. Clear? Now we move to 2018 का paper. In 2018 we had a beautiful question and that question was measures again taken in India for disaster risk reduction. Before and after signing the Sendai framework. So Sendai framework is a very important framework. So how is it different from the Hyogo framework? So initially we had a Hyogo framework, then Sendai framework came. And since this is something which has been in a lot of news as well, so you are expected to know about these things. मतलब आपको थोड़ा बहुत ये idea होना चाहिए. So if you have read about these strategies, that how do we combat disasters, how do we make sure that disaster preparedness, we have a proper preparedness, so we are in a position to write a decent answer on that. This is actually a very important point. So ये काफी important है. On top of that, we had a question on December 2004 tsunami brought havoc on 14 countries including India. ठीक है, ये एक statement दे रही. So you have to discuss factors responsible for occurrence of tsunami and its effect on the life and economy. So now mind you, when you answer such question, please make sure you read between the lines. You have to focus on effect on life and effect on economy separately. You cannot just make sure that you focus on one thing and you keep on ignoring the other. That is not going to help you. You have to make sure that you are focusing on all these components. So आपको दोनों के ऊपर focus करना है. And this is actually a problem which is there with a lot of students, that they are not going to focus on all these components side by side. So they may focus on one, they may end up ignoring the others, which certainly doesn't solve the purpose. And in the light of the guidelines of NDA, अब देखो बाद में Sendai पे question आया. Initially we had a question on NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, a statutory body. So this is why I always say that you have to be reading all these guidelines. Even if you have a gist, that is fine, but you have to have a decent idea on these guidelines, because these are the guidelines which is of immense importance. So please try to make sure of this idea very much precisely. ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. Clear? And one more thing I would suggest is that when a question comes in the examination, this basically means what? This basically means one thing only, that that particular topic is of importance for upcoming years also. I'm not saying the question will repeat itself, but the theme is going to remain the same. Theme to wahi rahegi. So always try to make sure that you are, mastering that very theme that is of, much importance. We don't have to let go that very theme. 2016 May, we had this question. Again, very interesting question. Well, we had two questions there, as you can see on your screens. Now, again, what is the theme? The frequency of urban flooding. You can see urban flooding theme is there due to high intensity of the rainfall and it's increasing year over year. So you have to discuss the reason of urban floods. You have to highlight the mechanism for preparedness to reduce the risk of such events. So you have to tell first of all the reasons. Bhai kya karan hai urban flooding ke? Reasons for the urban floods. And then you have to focus on the mechanism for preparedness to reduce the risk. So this is very much important that you have to know how precisely you focus on the reasons and what are the suited mechanisms in order to fight that. This is the kind of the question which has been asked on the urban floods. Urban floods pe we had this very question. So that is quite important. Very much important, in fact. We have to notice that. And then one thing is, very much sure that if you are actually, going by this, clarity, if you know how in the first place are we, going to be preparing, then literally you are not going to face even iota of problem in the examination. Why do I say that? Because these are the things which are usually ignored by a lot of aspirants. They don't see the previous year papers, they don't detect the themes, and फिर तो problem आएगी. So I always suggest you guys to be, detecting the themes beforehand going to the examination, because that is certainly important. For example, I'll be also focusing on, some other papers as well. For example, in 2016 only, we had this, National Disaster Management Authority guidelines. अभी देखो NDMA guidelines पे question 2016 में, and then again 2017 में we had in the light of the NDMA guidelines. ये देखो. So they are literally, repeating that particular thing. So discuss the measure to be adopted to mitigate the impact of the recent incident cloudburst in many places in Uttarakhand. यहाँ पे किस lines में पूछा था उसने? That tsunami brought the havoc. So discuss factor responsible. So in the light of the NDMA guideline, discuss the mechanism for such event. So you have to focus that NDMA की guidelines are important, be it tsunami, be it landslide, be it earthquake. So how exactly are we supposed to mitigate? How exactly are we supposed to, reduce the impact of a disaster? We have to do that diligently. So that is what the idea is. Getting it? So these are the points which are in a way very much important, and you are supposed to have a decent level of clarity as well on that. So ये बहुत important है. Now remember this thing, that we always have seen a growing trend in UPSC of not only focusing on the response or disaster, but also long-term resilience, long-term preparedness for disaster strategy. So in terms of climate change, sustainable development, you have to focus that what are the long-term strategies. भाई क्या है long-term strategies? हम लोग long-term के लिए क्या कर रहे हैं? Getting it? So we do not want to, expand all our, we don't want to spend all our resources on the short-term things. We have to focus on the long-term things, and that is what the idea is. So be very much prepared in order to answer such kind of questions. That is of course important. Clear? Again, in 2015 we had the question on like frequency of the earthquake appeared to have increased in the Indian subcontinent. However, India's preparedness for mitigating their impact has significant gaps. So now when we talk about our preparedness, there are gaps. So what all are the gaps? अब ये देखो, question is on mitigating their impact, mitigating the impact of earthquake. Earthquake के impact को हम क्या करना चाहते हैं? Mitigate करना चाहते हैं. अब mitigate आपने करना है earthquake के impact को. How can you do that? So you have to make sure that the buildings are following certain protocol whenever the building is, being constructed. They should not be flouting that particular thing. They should be following that in letter and spirit. यही चीज है. So we are supposed to at least have a proper clarity on these points, because that is certainly important. ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है. So I am hopeful that you are at least understanding that how important these ideas are. माने बहुत ज़्यादा important है, and we have to understand this very much clearly. Similarly, in 2014 we had a question that drought has been recognized as a disaster in view of its special expense. ठीक है? अब ये देखो टेम्पोरल ड्यूरेशन, स्लो ऑनसेट एंड लास्टिंग इफेक्ट्स ऑन वल्नरेबल सेक्शन, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो अगेन देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन ऑन 2010 की गाइडलाइंस फ्रॉम नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी एनडीएमए डिस्कस द मैकेनिज्म फॉर प्रिपेयर्डनेस टू डील विद एल नीनो ला नीना. अब ये देखो, नाउ दे आर आस्किंग अबाउट द एनडीएमए गाइडलाइंस ऑन क्लाउड बर्स्ट, on earthquake, on landslides, on El Nino, La Nina, on tsunami. They can ask you anything. So you have to properly have a basic idea on the NDMA की guidelines. They are going to be important. So NDMA guidelines क्या कहती हैं for particular things? So how do you prepare for certain things? There are NDMA guidelines and we are supposed to be very much clear about that particular thing. So that is what is required. Precisely, these are the things we have to be understanding very much precisely. So mind you, if you have done a proper understanding on that, if you have got a proper analysis on that, you are bound to do very well in this regards, I can assure you. वो आप कर लोगे. So एक proper clarity की जरूरत है. That is what is required at this point. जी, is that clear? When we talk about the 2013 का paper, there was a question, how important are vulnerability and risk assessment for pre-disaster management? ठीक है. As an administrator, what are the key areas that you should be focusing on the disaster management system? ये बताओ कि कौन से areas पे focus करोगे. So ये है disaster management system के context में. That is again a very important point. Is that clear? So I am hopeful that now you have got a decent level of understanding that what are vulnerability and risk assessment for disaster pre-disaster management. So ये बहुत important assessment कैसे करनी. So ultimately you are supposed to be very much clear that whenever a question comes, how are you supposed to be reacting in the first place, how are you supposed to be answering in the first place. That is very much important. Having said that, so remember one thing, that economy we have discussed, environment ecology we have discussed, today we have discussed disaster management. So I am hopeful that now you have got a decent understanding. Now in the upcoming classes we are planning to discuss the science and tech and internal security. That is what the planning is. Okay? So in the next two classes we are going to be doing that. So disaster management and environment ecology is done. So I am very much hopeful that this ways you are getting a decent clarity on each and every aspect. That is of course important. आपकी clarity बहुत important. If you are getting a decent clarity, this means we are on the right track. Getting it? So here you try to make sure of one thing, that you are very much clear about various important themes which are there. Important themes पे focus करना है. Right in the beginning of the class, what did I tell you? Remember? Right in the beginning of the class, I did tell you about that what exactly are the important themes in disaster management. Key themes. Climate induced disaster, cloud burst they're asking, and they're asking about the landslides, they're asking about the tsunami, they're asking about various disasters, right? Earthquake they're asking. And main focus is of course climate induced disaster. They're asking about various frameworks. They're asking about the long term preparedness. They're asking about NDMA guidelines, Sendai framework, Hyogo they asked. Then urban flooding ke causes, impact, mitigation efforts, all these kind of things we have seen multiple times. So you have to prepare urban flooding properly. You have to prepare various frameworks which are there in use, including NDMA guidelines and Sendai framework. You have to focus on various climate induced disasters for the UPSC mains examination. These are very much important in order to give you a holistic clarity in this particular regard. So I am really hopeful of just one thing, that this ways you are going to understand the importance of this, and you are also going to have a proper clarity in a in a proper sense, as we call it. So because that is something which is of immense importance. So ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है. In case you guys are having any doubts, you surely can ask me. अगर किसी को कोई भी डाउट है तो मुझे आप पूछ सकते हैं. Anyone. बेटे this year का तो ऐसे है कि again I would say this thing only, that you have to focus on the landslides. You do prepare some examples as well, like the landslide which took place in Kerala and recent landslides which took place in Himachal Pradesh. So you have to have a proper idea of that okay, this particular landslide happened, how can we reduce the damage, can we prepare well, what are the reasons. These are the kind of things which you can be doing for this year's preparation. So basically just prepare for the disasters which you have seen in the news. Has earthquake happened in India or nearby India? You have to read about that. And always try to quote some relevant examples. Always try to give some real guidelines which have been issued by the ministry. That ways you will always be in a position to write a better answer. Because see, I'll tell you something for UPSC mains now. This is a very important observation which I have made. Anybody and everybody can write something. अगर कुछ भी लिखना है तो वो कोई मुश्किल चीज नहीं है, कुछ भी तो कोई भी लिख देगा, you know. So if you ask me कि okay we have to just write anything and everything, so you can write that. It's not a difficult task at all. But in order to write something meaningful, that is where the real problem lies. That is where the real challenge is, that you have to write something meaningful. And that's the reason I always say that in order to write something meaningful, you have to prepare well. You have to prepare some facts, you have to prepare some reports, you have to prepare something which is going to add some value to your preparation. So that is what is required for your mains preparation. Always remember this thing. ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है. Anyways, so before I move ahead, I would like to tell you that we have got a Telegram channel. Make sure you join that. It's called IAS Origin UPSC. So you can scan this QR code as well. You can search that straight away. Here you get the PDFs of the session as well. So आपको session के PDFs मिल जाते हैं. So you go over that. Make sure you join that, and you can see previous sessions as well. The sessions which have already been conducted, you can watch them as well, and that surely will give you a lot of clarity again on that. So in the upcoming classes, as I've told you already, we are going to be covering now the science and tech ka portion and internal security ka portion. We are going to be covering in the next two classes. So next two classes, that is tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we are going to be doing that, matlab Wednesday and Thursday. So I hope that is fine with you. Got it? So that's very much it from my side. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and that's it. And I hope you do well in your paper. Of course, with all this analysis which you are doing, I am hopeful that आप बढ़िया ही करोगे, इसमें कोई doubt नहीं है जी. Clear? So ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है that we always pay proper focus on how we are reading things and how in the first place are we focusing on things, because that is important. Chaliye, thank you so very much, and have a great day. Thank you.